All right. Well, we're kind of starting to get a critical group of people coming into the room, and this meeting tends to be one where, we fluctuate somewhere around 75 people, and they come in and they sometimes need to come out. So to take advantage of the time that we have today, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So I'm going to just share my screen here for a moment to go over what we'll be doing today. So thank you all for coming today. I love how it loves to tell us that I'm sharing the screen and then takes up half the screen. But just wanted you all to know, I'm very grateful to see you here today. I hope that this change to the Wednesday has made it possible for some of you who may not have been available at the other Friday, scenario, a little more capable to tune in when you can. Just as a reminder, we will be having our future meetings now on the first Wednesdays of every month. So beginning here, we'd like to start with a welcome and then also, of course, a land acknowledgement. I would like to open this convening by recognizing that we are in the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We cannot work to fulfill our vision and our mission of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and cost of colonization. However, acknowledgement is only a first step, and we urge you to engage in countable relationships and informed actions. I'm sure everyone joining into this call has a very clear idea of how things are not just historical, but continue to exist within our present day. So thank you all for being here. Again, our future meetings will always now be on first Wednesdays of every month. So I hope you will all have a lovely July 4th holiday and then join us afterward. I would like to encourage you, if you haven't, to sign up for the BHI Network Policy Digest and the Policy Action Alerts. Less of the alerts lately because we are done with the legislative session, but it is a very good way for you to get a weekly idea of what's happening and keep connected. And I'm always looking for updates. I'm always looking for information about what should be in those digests. BHI is a very unique scenario in that it is a network, and we really do want to embrace the network mindset. And so the more stories we hear about your work, about your community, the more that we can spread that around so that people are informed and it can inform, advocacy and actions. I also wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the Washington State Affordable Homeownership Forum is going to be happening next week. That's a pretty heavy lift there, primarily by Washington Homeownership Resource Center. And I will be present there. Patients will also be there. A lot of people are going to be there, and it's going to be a great in-person event, an opportunity for connection. And we're going to hear a lot about the BHI project. We're going to be hearing a lot about what happened in the session legislatively. And I think just a really great opportunity for a touch point. So if you have the possibility of joining, please do. There's a link in the agenda, and that will lead you to the ability to get your ticket. And that is pretty much an all-day event. So it's kind of an 8 to 4 scenario. Of course, you would join at your leisure, but I will be there all day, and I hope to meet many of you in person. And then I did send a link in the agenda as well, which took our homeownership policy framework we had all worked together around last fall and just kind of delineated out the state actions and instead are focusing on the local city and county homeownership policy actions. So this particular meeting is taking up a kind of half of those actions. And then our next meeting, which will happen in July, will do the remaining actions that we had as local city and county. So we'll be thinking about Seattle Design Review exemption. We'll be hearing updates around the Seattle Equitable Development Zoning Project, and then delving into what's happening within King County. So thinking through the community preference anti-displacement strategies and getting an update about where they are and what's happening there. And then today, I'm very happy to welcome a number of guests. And, I'll go ahead and record this so that others who couldn't make it today will be able to receive this information. But today we'll be hearing from Chad Vacalin from HDC about the Seattle Housing Levy. We'll hear from Jesse Simpsons of HDC around comprehensive plan projects and a new Complete Communities Coalition. Amanda DeShazo will be talking to us about the Tacoma Pierce County home ownership line item, which happened in their budget, which was amazing, as well as the great achievement in Pierce County of a 0.1% sales tax for affordable housing. As we all know, PHI is part of, Seattle, South Seattle, but also North Pierce County. And so it's great to understand what's happening in all the different areas. And then we'll also hear from Denise Henriksen, the co-founder of EcoThrive, who will tell us about a really exciting project that is happening in Burien. And then we'll be all set. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And then I do see that we have Chad in the room. Just going to make sure that he is able to co-host if he needs to do anything visually. But other than that, let Chad have his sip of water. And then hopefully he sounds better than I do. But I'm getting better every day. But thank you all again so much for being here. And, to keep us moving along here, I'm going to go ahead and move it to Chad.
Thank you, Bambi. Let me share my screen here. All right. Is that looking good on your end? All right, cool. Well, thanks, Bambi. As she noted, my name is Chad Vacalin. I'm the Advocacy and Mobilization Manager here at HDC. And I appreciate the time that you've given me to just kind of go over some Seattle levy updates and kind of overview briefly. So I know everyone is pretty familiar with, the state of housing that we find ourselves in right now in the crisis that it is. But I do think just having a couple sides to ground us in like the real kind of numbers and visuals that will help kind of have this conversation will be helpful. So to start off, I just want to show a couple graphs and slides of where we are. So right now there's about 77,000 households within Seattle who are cost burdened, and this affects people across the income spectrum, but it's particularly impacts those that are at the lower end of the income spectrum. So when I say cost burdened, it's a definition we use, as many of you know, just for folks that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing related costs. Severely cost burdened is over 50%. So as you can see, folks on the lower end of the income spectrum pay a substantial amount of money for their everyday housing needs. And that just goes to show how expensive it is to live in Seattle and the surrounding area. So this graph just kind of it illustrates visually how much of a gap there is between home prices, home costs, and median rent. So even though that incomes have gone up over the last several years, they've been far outpaced with how the rising cost of housing. So that gap is large now, and it's continually get larger. So it's really important more now than ever to really get policies in place that are going to, help meet the needs of our community. One more here that just kind of shows how fast that these costs have gone up. So just in the last decade, the median home prices have increased, by 54%. And I think it's even this is in 2021, so it might be just even a little bit more than that now. So in the next 20 or so years, the King County Growth Management Planning Council projects that the Seattle will need approximately 112 new homes by 2044. And most of these, over 70,000, are for folks at 80% AMI and below. So the Seattle Housing Levy is one of our biggest tools that we have locally that invests in permanent affordable housing, the type that Seattle residents so desperately need. So as we all know, this is a voter approved property tax, and the proposal is for 7 years. And it has over 40 years of being a proven tool to make positive outcomes for our residents and community members. And at any given point in time, there are 16,000 individuals that are living in homes that were funded by the Seattle Housing Levy. So that's pretty remarkable. And this map kind of shows the geographic distribution of where levy funded projects have occurred throughout its history. And then these green ones are home ownership projects, and these orange are 2016 rental. And one other thing I might add that just reinforce, Bambi mentioned at the beginning, but the housing levy is a big part of the funding aspect within the BHI policy framework. So as I mentioned, this is a proven tool, and every housing levy has met or exceeded its goals. And currently we're on track to do the same for the current levy that's in place right now. And these data points that you see on the screen are from the 2022 annual report from the Office of Housing. And they show that, all of how well the community has done in meeting the goals. So rental housing production, rental housing preservation, home ownership, all these goals that were approved by the voters in 2016 have really been drastically exceeded. And with at the point of this report, there was a year left in the levy, and the figures pointed that we're on track to meet the other goals that pertain to homelessness prevention, housing stability, and OMS as well. So just zeroing in on the home ownership goals, you can just see like how drastically our community has exceeded those goals. And that also illustrates the need that we all know. So this current iteration of the levy, 2023 housing levy, would generate $970 million over 7 years. And the mayor's proposal was informed over, like 11 plus months of community and stakeholder engagement. And then, it was judiciously shaped through the 20-member technical advisory committee. And that included some of you, some HDC members as well, others. It comprised subject matter experts, private, nonprofit, housing developers, service providers, labor representatives, and public housing and homelessness agencies. So this $970 million proposal equates to a tax rate of 45 cents per $1,000 in assessed value. And for the typical Seattle homeowner, it would cost roughly $383 per year. And this graph just kind of illustrates the different programs that the proposal would fund. And just for a level of comparison, the 2016 levy was for $290 million, and the median home cost at that, or median assessed value of a home in 2016 was $480,000 compared to $855,000 now, and it would cost the average homeowner in 2016 about $122 per year. So diving a little bit deeper into some of the specifics of the home ownership program. The program has a goal to create and maintain 367 affordable home ownership opportunities. So this includes developing new high quality permanent affordable homes. It also includes helping low-income homeowners maintain stable housing through home repair grants. It also would help prevent foreclosure for homeowners who are at risk of losing their homes. And it assists eligible home buyers with home purchase loans. It also has a small aspect in it where it could acquire existing rental buildings for home ownership opportunities. And in comparison to the previous levy from 2016, the home ownership program investments would increase by over 5 times. So the 2016 levy was $9.5 million, and this jumps up to $51 million over the 7 years of the levy. The ordinance also requires the Office of Housing to develop a levy administration and financial plan and submit that to the council. And this includes developing policies and guidelines for the various levy funded programs and buckets. So that it will be an ongoing thing that we're yet to see, but there have been a few amendments that were added that would be of particular note to this group, to our BHI network. So just want to go over those real quick just to highlight them. So one amendment would add language to the ANF plan, particularly for the home ownership program, that encourages the development of family-sized units utilizing city-owned or publicly owned land, as well as other incentives to reduce the costs of building such units. So the intended effect of this amendment is an effort to really reduce the costs by using free or discounted publicly owned land to support the further development of those larger home ownership units. A second amendment that got added, it would add language to the ANF plan for the home ownership program that would establish a focus for those at risk of displacement or who face barriers to equitably accessing home ownership due to various types of discriminatory policies in the past, policies and practices. So those things include things such as redlining, mortgage lending discrimination, or restricted covenants. And the intended effect of this is it really sets out council's intent for the home ownership program to assist in addressing, those key race and social equity goals that they have. And the third amendment I want to briefly touch on is additional language that's been added to the ANF plan to encourage geographic distribution of low-income housing with a focus on areas with a high risk of displacement and underserved in previous affordable housing development. So this intended effect really states council's intention of encouraging development in areas that are at higher risk of displacement in the city. So where are we now? This graph shows the trajectory of the process of the renewal. We are right here, and hot off the press this morning, the select committee on the 2023 housing levy unanimously passed the levy ordinance out of committee. So this will be sent to the full council next week on June 13th. And we are very confident that this will be passed in full council. Just being engaged in the process, but also it passed unanimously in the committee, and the committee consists of every member of the council. So we anticipate this will be passed next, what is it, the 13th? I don't know, is that a Wednesday? And that the mayor will sign it that day. And one thing, just to let you know, there will be a housing levy passage celebration on that day. So in addition, once it's signed, folks will be meeting around 4 p.m. in the Bertha Knight Landis room at City Hall. And we want to open that invitation and make sure that you all are invited to attend that with us. It will be kind of like a celebratory atmosphere. There'll be a couple speakers, including Mayor Harrell, Councilmember Mosqueda, Patience Malaba from HDC, some representatives from the labor community and members of the community at large as well. And this is really a milestone in the renewal process, and will be a jumping off point to get the housing levy in full gear. And speaking of getting the housing campaign in full gear, just a couple brief updates for the Yes for Homes campaign. So this has officially been filed with the PDC in anticipation of the passage of the legislation next week. There has been a campaign committee in formation, and campaign manager has been hired. That group is going to be working with NWP Consulting on campaign strategy and being their political consultant. There's also another fundraising consultant, Blue Wave Politics, who will be participating in that group to help generate revenue to ensure that the levy gets passed by voters. And just to reiterate, this campaign phase will commence as soon as the mayor signs the legislation next week. So that brings me to my final slide, which is just how to get involved. So up until this point, public comment, public engagement has been really fruitful in not only developing a really solid increase in the housing levy to really meet the need of where we're at, meeting the moment, but it's also ensured that it's passed, through council pretty smoothly. So I know many of you have been involved in that. I really want to say thank you for your long efforts. It's really appreciated. And I know that we just kind of, when everybody collectively participates in things like that, it has really good outcomes. So thanks for that. Still more to come. I know we still have the actual campaign and you get it across the finish line in November. Another thing that various organizations can get involved with is through the levy endorsement, so publicly endorsing the levy. And this is essential for the campaign to really begin from a position of strength and support from the affordable housing community and just the community at large. And it will provide, credibility and momentum to drive a successful campaign in the future. So really aiming to have a distinct list of endorsers that will give the campaign a solid foundation. And we'll be seeking endorsements throughout the campaign leading up all the way to November. But we really encourage folks who are able to endorse early to do that, so we can really just drive up that momentum to build off of. Obviously, campaigns cost money, so there'll be a fundraising aspect involved in this as well. So in the future, there will be efforts to raise funds to ensure that voters will pass the housing levy in November. And one thing I really want to uplift here too is just the ability for us to collectively mobilize our network. What makes us strong is that we are a network of networks, and we can leverage our relations to promote widespread support for the levy and bring more homeownership opportunities to the Black community. And further on, we will get out the vote efforts. There'll be levy kind of themed events throughout the campaign, opportunities to volunteer. A lot of that stuff is we'll it's kind of like TBD to we can follow up in the future once, you know, the campaign committee, campaign manager kind of has a solid plan going forward. But we're really looking forward to engaging with you all to help get this across the finish line. And I think I will leave it at that and kind of open it up to further discussion, and any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer. If I can't, I'll find out and get you an answer. But there's a lot of collective knowledge in this room, so other people might have that answer as well. So I'll stop sharing now. And I see that Cliff/Ryan have their hand up, so go ahead.
Sorry about that. We're getting ready for our luncheon tomorrow, so putting together name tags and all that fun stuff. It's not necessarily a question, and so I'll apologize for that ahead of time. But I do want to note that we're talking about $51 million in a bond measure for Seattle housing that will result in $971 million. So we're talking roughly 5% of the overall bond measure. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we're at least getting something, and that it is an increase over what it was before significantly. But one thing I do, at least especially as we are in this room, at least as we are, you know, home ownership focused entities and organizations here that serve Seattle, I do want to just make sure that we note that this isn't anywhere near enough. And we need to be doing a lot more, and this is a good start. But as we do this well, and as we do other campaigns and look at other organizations and other entities and other places, that we remember this is a floor. This is not the ceiling. We need to be going higher as we continue down the path here. So just kind of wanted to note that. I know there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm glad, again, 51 million is a lot more than we've had before, but it needs to be more than that overall if we actually want to end up solving this problem.
Yep, thanks, Ryan, and agreed. So, and well said. Kathleen?
I just want to thank Ryan for bringing that up and second it. The narrative is we're still spending more on Office of Housing Administration of programs than we spend on homeownership itself. So that is an important thing to point out. The percentage of people who qualify for affordable housing that could be served by homeownership is about 44%, but we are only spending, we're spending less than 6% of the total investment on homeownership. That is creating systemic problems in that we don't have places for people to move up and out of their subsidized rental. And we are also sending a message that that we don't, the best you could hope for in the city of Seattle, unless you're super lucky, is to have the opportunity to rent a home. And that's not the message that we should be sending. So I just want to reinforce what Ryan said and say, you know, we're grateful for the gains, but it is nowhere near enough. And we have to constantly be pushing back on this narrative that homeownership doesn't have a full place at the table in the affordable housing continuum.
Thanks, Kathleen. Again, I agree with what you say, and I just want to note that with that increase up to $51 million, that was a result of your advocacy as a collective group in the homeownership field. So I know, as Brian and Kathleen both mentioned, it's not enough, but that ground was made up, that significant increase in investment was made because of the efforts of you all. So thank you.
Yeah, and then I would just add, all that being said, and I know I was a bit of a Debbie Downer there, I do also want to note, it's also incredibly important that we get this renewed and that we do this and we do this work and we go, you know, it's one thing to be a little disappointed amongst ourselves as homeownership organizations and entities. But publicly facing, we need to make sure that we are unified in strong vocal support of the Seattle Housing Levy and of getting this renewed, because, you know, we can fight our fights internally later, but let's get the dollars first, and then we'll fight over it.
Any other questions coming up? I'm just going to reiterate, you know, a heartfelt thank you to all of you. Many of you were involved in the public hearings, either sending in commentary or making time out of your day. There was a rally last week and many of you were showing up. I think it is important to understand that, you know, BHI is a new network and we are building voice. We are building recognition. And through that, we are building power to influence. And I think the amendments you heard about are a real reflection of that, a real reflection of the BHI values around thinking about anti-displacement, around thinking about how a policy moves forward in a thoughtful way and not just in a performative way. And of course, there's no policy that's ever going to accomplish all goals. But I do think it's super important for people to recognize when they've made a change and recognize when their voice is essential. And that has happened here within just this particular instance of the Seattle Housing Levy. I don't think we would have seen those amendments. I don't think we would have seen that level of, you know, engagement around even considering the increase around homeownership. And so I do hope that you will take a moment to come and celebrate on June 13th. You know, be sure to bring all the follow-up. You can have it with cake. You can have it in a congenial environment where maybe you'll be able to bump up against someone who you can give some of that input to. But I do hope to see that you will all continue to advocate during the campaign, during the process in which we talked about the homeownership policy framework. We knew the Seattle Housing Levy was going to be renewed, and we knew that in terms of the BHI goals for moving towards homeownership, it was going to be an important funding source. And so, you know, I would like to continue to encourage us to advocate to make sure that we're capturing all of those homes, you know, towards our effort. And that can happen when you're using your voice. So just wanting to thank you all and to provide you with that possibility if you want to come down to City Hall, you know, and say your congratulation and also bring your input in a room with cake where you could pull the mayor to the side and say what you think. But so I'm just saying there's an opportunity there for connection. And I agree 100% with both Kathleen and with Ryan, and also just, you know, we're moving to the next stage in this effort, and it will be very important for the network to continue to be activated and continue to show their voice and influence. And so as we continue to keep you informed, I hope you will all feel that balance between feeling encouraged that change is happening, and then also, you know, knowing that change doesn't come exactly as we want every time, but that doesn't stop us from continuing forward. Are there any other questions that are coming to mind for anyone around the Seattle Housing Levy? Any announcements around the levy? Anything levy related anyone would like to bring into the space right now? Just want to make sure that you have a chance if there's anything that needs to be said. All right. Well, if you think of something, you know, please be sure to reach out, and I can connect you as much as I can with people who might have answers if I don't have them for you. Oh, it looks like the Ryan and Cliff duo have a hand up. Go for it.
Sorry, I'm now balancing 3 different things at the same time. But one thing I did want to quickly mention, you asked about things to talk about when it comes to the housing levy. we're actually, and this is something I've mentioned before, but we actually are going to be doing a lot of work around the Seattle Housing Levy and renewal as well internally, as well as externally. We're actually going to be helping do some digital advertising. We're going to do some phone banking. We're going to do a lot of grassroots activity and really mobilizing folks, particularly with that home ownership lens, as it relates to renewing the housing levy. So, anybody who wants to learn more about that, please feel free to get directly in contact with me, or you can actually get in contact with Cliff, who's going to be leading our campaign work when it comes to the Seattle Housing Levy renewal piece, at least of our of Habitat's actions specifically. So just wanted, you had asked if there was anything levy related. I wanted to share that.
Absolutely. And if anyone else has things within their organization or efforts that they're going to be in, we want to make sure that we are kind of building a space here within these meetings, not only to receive information, but to provide it. And, as Chad was saying, this room is full of amazing thinkers, and, we can't always know what's happening, and a network is messy, but the more that we can communicate what's happening in our particular neck of the woods, I think, the more we can amplify our work. So unless there's another question or a comment around the levy, I think we'll move forward to another aspect of the homeownership policy framework that we have been advocating around, and that is the idea of the comprehensive plans. And of course, there's an effort happening in pretty much all the cities, and we're going to hear about kind of the Seattle effort right now. And so I will hand it over to Jesse Simpson.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bambi. And yes, big caveat, this presentation will be pretty Seattle focused, but I am noting that cities all across the Puget Sound are also going through their comprehensive plan updates in this moment. We at HDC are also quite involved in the Bellevue comprehensive plan update, and we'll end with some information about work we're doing in Tukwila. But basically, every city is needing to go through this update process and is tackling some of the same issues. This coalition work, though, the Complete Communities Coalition, is focused on Seattle level work. So I want to give a quick background on comprehensive plans and zoning more generally. So comprehensive plans are a North Star for growth over the next 20 years. They set the framework for all of the detailed zoning, as well as where the city is directing investments. It's a long, drawn out process, takes about 2 years or so, and we're about halfway through that right now, and really heading into the point where it's starting to heat up. The cities, as part of their comprehensive plan updates, have to do an environmental impact statement to analyze all of the different effects of the proposed changes to land use. So that's just a little bit of overall framing. So in terms of what zoning is, just big picture, it restricts what can be built and where, whether that's uses, density, height, your setbacks and step backs, and even further down into wonkier stuff, lot coverage, floor area ratio, all that. Map at the right is a generalized zoning map of the city of Seattle. Basically, you can have multifamily development in the orange and purple areas here, and it's only neighborhood residential, which up until a few years ago was solely single family. Now can have some accessory dwelling units in the light yellow. The history of zoning goes back about 100 years or so, and from its beginnings, it's been deeply entwined with notions of exclusion, of separating out people by space. The Supreme Court, so cities started forming up these explicit racial zoning maps in the 1910s, where they were drawing lines and saying that white people could live in this part of town and black people could live in this part of town. Supreme Court struck that down in 1917, but then proceeded to look the other way as cities enacted a series of zoning codes which accomplished the same mechanism through strictly through racially neutral, just economic mechanisms. This guy, Harlan Bartholomew, was kind of the first professional urban planner working in the US. He was hired by the city of Seattle as a consultant in their development of their 1923 comprehensive zoning code, and then also consulted on their 1956 comprehensive plan creation. And he was pretty explicit about using these zoning codes as a mechanism for enforcing racial segregation and division, for ensuring that some areas of the city remained white and upper class by remaining single family. And the idea was, I mean, the language gets pretty gross, talking about invaded areas. The Supreme Court upheld this whole notion of Euclidean zoning, of single family only zoning, holding that the apartment house is a mere parasite in the Euclid decision. And this image from the city of Seattle zoning commission shows kind of how this notion of exclusion, both racially and economically, was conceptualized. We see the effects of this to this day, where like you can here initially is an image of all of the homes for rent at an affordable rate below 80% of area median income last August. And with a handful of exceptions, which are mostly grandfathered homes, they are all within the multifamily zone land. And this whole process of zoning has forced a lot of development to happen, multifamily development to happen in the areas with the highest displacement risk, while keeping areas that have low displacement risk, but still quite good access to opportunities encased in amber. And a little word here, Chad was showing you the image of all of the Office of Housing's levy investments. Wanted to just show the overlay against the multifamily commercial zoning at a simplified level. What we see is that land use is a necessary but not sufficient condition for affordable housing, that you basically only see larger scale affordable housing, whether that's the newer, whether that's the big rental housing, or even some of the newer affordable home ownership developments developed by Homestead and Habitat. It's all constrained within the multifamily and commercial zoned land. And so we need, zoning alone is not enough, but you need it as a condition to be able to make the investments in directly affordable housing that we so desperately need as a city. And then here I've got basically an image of that original 1923 zoning code. And it really hasn't changed that much. There's some little bits at the edges where you've got slight change in zoning since 1923, but by and large, over the intervening 100 years, we have not broken out of the framework set to entrench segregation of people and uses. And this whole zoning framework was built around increasing property values and maintaining that segregation over time. And it's succeeded beyond the wildest dreams of its progenitors. But this comprehensive plan update is an opportunity to start to break out of that. Here's what a slide showing kind of what this two cities within a city has looked like in practice. You've got multifamily development constrained to the arterials on the one hand, and then on the other, single family zoned land that has not substantially changed since the 1920s or 30s, except for the houses getting dramatically more expensive. And this has a number of negative impacts beyond just there's the environmental justice implications of constraining new relatively affordable housing to the most polluted arterials. And there's also the side of locking in some amount of auto dependency within the single family zones, as you're not allowing for the density necessary to support walkable access to amenities. All right, so that was a bunch of history there. Gonna pivot now towards what we're doing with this comprehensive plan update. They only update the comprehensive plans basically once a decade. So this is HDC is getting involved in this as a rare opportunity to change the overall framework for growth and actually break out of the legacies of that 100 years of just tweaking at the edges and allowing more housing broadly throughout the city of Seattle and as well as in neighboring cities. The Office of Planning and Community Development started a racial equity analysis of this growth strategy, of the urban village strategy, and found pretty bad. It found that it perpetuates racial disparities, which was not a surprise of any of us working in this field on a regular basis, and was why, in fact, we pushed forward a racial equity analysis of the growth strategy. But it really provides quite a bit of information to leverage in support of big changes to our growth strategy to allow more homes to be built across the city. So their recommendations they came up with were centered around a few different angles on how to address the continued legacy of disparities and how they've been perpetuated over decades. First was in changing the growth strategy to allow more housing types across the city with more equitable access to wealth building. Second, increasing funding for affordable housing. So increasing affordable housing with community control, long-term affordability. And third, to develop the city's anti-displacement framework and really fundamentally funding for like the Equitable Development Initiative. So the city now is going through a comprehensive, the draft environmental impact statement, and this stuff is all framed around alternatives for development. So there are basically 4 action alternatives that they're looking at that range in terms of, that all look at different ways to add more housing throughout the city outside of the existing multifamily zoned land, the existing urban villages. Gonna walk through those in order. So first off, we're looking at the broad alternative, which lines up pretty well with HB 1110 and is focused on adding missing middle housing types like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes in all neighborhood residential zones. 1110 has been extraordinarily helpful because it means we don't have to focus and expend as much political capital and energy in fighting these very difficult fights. Still maybe a little bit, but it sets a strong baseline that the city is going to need to move forward with throughout the preferred and adopted alternative. So another one they're looking at is the corridor approach, which is focused on adding more housing, allowing more housing in the 5-minute or quarter-mile watershed around frequent transit and parks. Now, when you map this out, this is about half the city. It's a reflection of overall how much frequent and quality transit is available around city of Seattle. OPCD has been a little cagey about what exact types of housing would be allowed within the corridors, but they are at least planning on going up to like some 4- and 5-story multifamily apartment and condo developments in the watershed around transit. And big important part of this alternative in terms of seeing it be as impactful and equitable as possible is going to be allowing housing off the arterials. So it's thinking about the watershed and not just jamming more capacity right on the busiest streets. Then they also have this focused alternative, which is looking at adding more housing in like urban hamlets scattered around the city, small nodes where you would be allowing mid-rise construction. And then finally, you've got all of it combined together in the alternative 5 combined approach. And what you will see on this map as well is that in this approach, they bulk out all of the urban villages to being at least a 10-minute or half-mile walk from a central point of the village or from a future light rail station. Any questions before I transition over to more talking about the Complete Communities Coalition, what we're comprised, who we're comprised of, and our main goals, aims with this engagement?
So not so much of a question, but just maybe a comment. In terms of looking at all these different alternatives, the idea would be that we need more, not less. And therefore, in terms of advocacy, the positioning has been on the combined idea that, yes, there's merit to every single one of these ideas, but to suit a problem that is so complex, we also need solutions that can embrace that complexity.
Yep, basically. I think alternative 5, we don't know exactly what the DEIS is going to look like, but regardless of exactly what it proposes, I think we are likely pushing for alternative 5, as well as to ensure that that is as strong as possible and that it's paired with high quality anti-displacement strategies. Yeah, timeline. I've got a slide on that actually later here. So we are about halfway through this whole process. The city is running a bit behind schedule. We had been gearing up for a June 20th release of the DEIS, and that's been pushed now to early September sometime. And that will kickstart a 45-day public comment period, which will be I think the most important time to weigh in about the alternatives and where there's still the most leeway for shifting within them. Then OPCD will take that feedback, confer internally, and create a preferred alternative and a final environmental impact statement, or FEIS. And then they will release that sometime early next year, April, May-ish. And then council, that'll transmit it over to the city council to review and approve the final plan, make some amendments potentially, and do the implementing zoning. So a little bit on Complete Communities Coalition. It's been a work in progress for coming up on a year almost. We've had basically 2 main engagement points before this, before formalizing ourselves. There was a August 2022 coalition comment letter on the scoping, which they had released. It's basically it's a whole set of these with more detail. We gave a bunch of feedback on that. Then they came back with revised scoping. We were a little dissatisfied that it didn't fully incorporate, many of our comments on the revised, on the scoping. And so we put out a second coalition comment letter on really focused on the areas in which there is still leeway within their revised scoping to do more for housing affordability and abundance. And then in April, May 2023, we've had some big steps forward in terms of formalizing the coalition, pulling together a steering committee, some mission and value statement, laying out policy priorities, and doing a round of engagement through the presentation to HDC members at the Affordable Housing Week. And now we've got basically 10 or so steering committee members, as well as a number of people, especially HDC members who have been engaged in and have signed on to one or both of the letters that we've sent. It's a pretty broad range of stakeholders, co-led by HDC and FutureWise, but it encompasses basically a spectrum from community-based groups, business groups, market developers, affordable housing developers, and like housing activists and socialists. It's really pulling this whole group together as like a strong voice to push for the comprehensive plan update to be as ambitious as possible, and to really push past the status quo of land use and those centuries of exclusionary policies that have gotten us to where we are today.
And Jesse, is your steering committee finalized? Are you still looking for input or people who might be interested?
Yeah, we're not finalized. At some level, I don't think this work is ever really finalized. I think it'll always be a little in flux. But yeah, we're still looking to add a couple steering committee members. We're in some active conversations, potentially around adding El Centro. And I think if anybody here is positioned and wants to jump in, more than welcome to have a conversation about that. And I'll also highlight that as we're creating these work groups, there's ways to get involved that aren't being on the full steering committee itself. And yeah, I think some of the steering committee membership may flux a little as capacity changes over the course of engagement. And we're also doing quite a bit of engagement with HDC members through the policy advisory group, who are supposed to weigh in on the 27th or something, right after we had the release of the draft plan, but this timeline shift has kind of screwed with that. Oh, and here's a little bit of what our comments have been to date, the high level comments to the revised scoping, focusing on making sure the corridor alternative is as basically equitable and transformative as possible by going throughout the entire watershed, bumping up the broad alternative, and increasing the size of the anchors in the focus alternative. Kathleen.
I'm gonna, my new bone that I'm gonna start repeating a lot is making sure that these policy initiatives reach out to voices that would normally get marginalized, but those from within our membership. I think we're all really pressed for time, and it's difficult sometimes to secure those marginalized voices. But when we don't take the extra step to do that, we tend to default to kind of some groupthink about from the usual suspects. So I would really strongly encourage you to broaden, particularly in the area of homeownership, the voices that are at the table. I absolutely affirm Ryan's leadership and Cliff's input, and there are also other voices that need to be at the table as well. So thanks for taking that into consideration.
Well, and I think that's a really good segue for talking about, this is an item that is within the homeownership policy framework, and we're bringing it here to the group because this is the moment at which it's time to be cognizant that the effort is starting, and this is when we'll be asking you to use your voice. So if you can step in any way within this process, happy to connect you to, the meetings that might be happening, or the people that you might have a particular idea around that you'd like to share it with. I think it's hard sometimes when you start talking about comprehensive plans and you glaze over a little bit because, like, could there be more details, right? even the idea of the big, environmental impact statement and the draft of that and all of those things. But I do think it's really important to remember that this sets a vision for changing how we have been and how we want to be in the future. And so, although it can be kind of difficult, again, to see where we can participate with our voice and create change, if we don't, we know that the design is intentional. The design is all working the way it's supposed to be working. The idea is for certain voices to be heard and certain scenarios to happen. And unless we actively can participate in disrupting that, we're just going to see it continue forward. This is something that is engaged in consciously on many levels, but doesn't have to be, and in many levels is not consciously being perpetuated. It's just, it is actually self-generating. So unless we choose to be that disruption through the ability of giving a different perspective and demanding more, then the status quo will always kind of be the easy fallback. So I do encourage you all, you will hear a lot of communication from me over the next year. There will be many opportunities to engage. And I really do hope to encourage you to feel impassioned about that, because if you think about the way that we live within our cities, if this is going to set a 10 and 20-year vision, all of the things that we do on these other political levels, all of the different legislation that we produce, all of the other wins that we have, they land up getting fit within the idea of a comprehensive plan. And so if that comprehensive plan isn't comprehensively equitable, isn't actually trying to create change, then we're going to still keep pushing. We're going to still continue to work in the margin instead of the center. So I would encourage you all, if you have capacity or even just interest and to be able to set your boundaries around your capacity, please do feel free to reach out to myself or, to Jesse. It needs to be a coalition that has voice. This is something that's going to be a process with many points of input, but it is truly essential that the comprehensive plans begin to reflect a different plan. And I believe that the BHI effort is a voice that is growing every day, and being able to bring that voice in is showing really obvious immediate results in the efforts that we've done within just the last year. So I encourage you all, in as much as you can, to maybe not try to glaze over around comprehensive plans and all the details. It's all the things we already know. We see where we live and why we live there. And it's time for the government plan to reflect a change. So I would just encourage you all, if you have questions, please speak up. If you have work that's happening, if you have a suggestion of, who do you see missing in that steering committee and what other voices, please do chime in and make it better through your efforts. Are there
Thanks,
any?
Beth. Oh,
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, are there any other questions or?
I just wanted to flesh out a little bit of our engagement plans too. I mean, they're shifting after we learned about the delay yesterday, but we will be planning on like 3 or 4 in public community engagement events during the course of the draft environmental impact statement, with the first couple of those being focused more on two-way communication, letting people know what is in the draft plan, as well as getting their input on what they would like to see as a response to those policies. And then with the latter ones being more focused on how to craft a comment letter yourself. And the city will have some kind of engagement events. We think they've been really cagey about telling us any of their plans, and we'll drive engagement to that. And I think we'll probably look to have a follow-up kind of presentation to this group once that draft plan is actually released, and we have a bit of an orientation towards it. And yeah, make your voice heard.
And then, of course, this is a Seattle Comprehensive Plan Coalition that we're talking about. But as we were saying, comprehensive plans are happening across all cities, and they're all in various stages. And so this kind of as a segue to hearing from Amanda, who is with Tacoma Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium. I would like to let you know that there is work going on currently in Tukwila. And they have kind of 2 things that they're doing. They're thinking through all of the middle housing, the passage, how to make that work, and then how to roll it into their comprehensive plan update. So right now they are asking for ideas and stories and concerns in the Tacoma area, or sorry, Tukwila area, around how housing can better meet the residents' needs as the city grows and changes over the next 20 years. So I'm going to put some links inside the chat here about an engagement hub where they're basically saying, please come to this hub and tell us what we don't know. And then they also have a specific middle housing survey to understand, what kind of things do you want to see in the city of Tukwila? HDC is also going to be engaging in a webinar around the Tukwila Middle Housing and Comprehensive Plan, and that will be happening on June 26th. I will send out more details once that's fleshed out. And then they have been having the beginning of their open houses. They just had one yesterday afternoon. They're going to schedule another around middle housing, and then there will be further scheduling of more kind of general comp plan conversations. And so I will be sure to share details within the policy digest that comes out on Fridays. But feel free to reach out if you are organized or interested or live in, or your best friend is a Tukwila resident and you want to make sure that you're contributing within that process. The size of Tukwila is a really interesting size to kind of almost have a case study of, well, what happens when we start talking about a smaller city that's growing and it's thinking about its comprehensive plans and is thinking about the new middle housing legislation. And it can really be kind of a case study, a way where some cities are ahead of others in their comp planning process, and we can learn from the process along the way through other cities. And, you know, of course, the BHI geography would be inclusive of Tukwila. So very much going to continue to try and provide a geographically balanced set of ideas to think about when we talk about these policy actions. So Jesse, unless you have any kind of last words, I think we're gonna move on to Amanda.
I think that's about it.
Thanks so
We're right on time.
Excellent.
Great,
And
thank
Amanda,
you. Yeah, I'm here. I'm not going to turn my camera on. I hope that's okay. It really makes my computer go slow. But I can give you an update on some stuff that we're working on in Pierce County. I can't remember if the last time that we had the BHI network policy meeting, if I had shared that we passed the 0.1% to support affordable housing development in resources, services across Pierce County. So that is amazing. We're super excited. It's 20 million annually that we'll get to use for more affordable housing development. And we are working with the county council members to see how we can flex those dollars to use them for homeownership. It's not entirely clear. We know there are some other jurisdictions that are using them for homeownership. But my understanding is that they need to do a little bit more research. So the next step for them is to come up with a spending plan. And they are to present that to county council in December. The funds will start being collected July. And then my understanding is they're going to have like a small pool that they'll be able to give out. And then the next year they'll have the full 20 million to allocate. So really exciting, great work. Also, we proclaimed our first affordable housing week in Pierce County, which was exciting for us. We have aligned it with King County, which is great. And now moving forward, I expect that we'll continue doing that and then can highlight also a lot of the great work that's going on with affordable housing and homeownership and the BHI network with that. And then I wanted to give an update on our down payment assistance program through the city of Tacoma. So the city of Tacoma allocated $500,000 in their budget to go towards CPA. I learned that they actually received an extra $1 million from the state for down payment assistance. Also really exciting. I know Felicia Medlin with the city of Tacoma is working to use those funds flexibly. But I'm not entirely sure what that looks like at this point. So I'll try to get an update for you all next time. I know they have a goal to get 65% of those funds to Black households. So that's really exciting and aligns with the BHI network. And then one more thing I wanted to give you guys an update on is the city of Tacoma is starting to work on their anti-displacement strategy. They're doing a presentation to city council tomorrow, and they sent me their slides. So I haven't gotten the full rundown of it yet, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of policies with you guys that are pretty exciting. So they are obviously still like working on the down payment assistance program. Something new that they're talking about is potentially land banking, expanding inclusionary zoning. They're also looking at support for community land trusts. Kathleen, I know you've been doing some work down here, so Tacoma's that's on their table of options to choose from. They're also looking at a preservation ordinance, which would be a notice of intent to sell, right of first refusal, or a preservation fund. They also have community prioritization as an option, and then housing and land reparations. So in the slide deck that they sent me, there's no context to what those things mean at this point, but tomorrow they'll be giving the update. So I hope that next time we do the check-in, I'll have more information for you all. And then in terms of comp planning, they are going through their home in Tacoma process for their comp plan. It is just as crazy as Seattle's, and we've been doing it for months now. I'm trying to follow along, but it's extremely difficult for me. I'm not a planning person. But I do know with the changes that came about with HB 1220, we have been seeing some of those effects in our smaller jurisdictions, so Lakewood and Puyallup, specifically around affordable housing, not so much about homeownership, but have been passing some pretty bad policy, which will make it harder for affordable housing to be built. So those are not yet finalized, but we're advocating hard to make sure that they keep it as easy as possible to build affordable housing. And so I know next on the plate, at least for the city of Lakewood, they'll be working on their middle housing piece. And so I would love maybe Jesse to connect with folks. As all of these bad policies are popping up, we're playing whack-a-mole, and it would be great to get out in front of it and really have maybe a toolkit or something that we can provide jurisdictions around the BHI priorities and homeownership. So we can say, here, this is really great policy. This is what we recommend. We don't have anything like that in Pierce County, so I'm looking for some partners. Yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. Thanks for giving me some time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Any quick questions coming up for anyone for Amanda while we have her in the room?
I will just note that I saw Jason Gauthier. He's with SHAPE, which is our South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. He did just mention that a lot of our Puget Sound jurisdictions are going through their racial equity analysis. And it looks like, I think, Jason, you just sent me one. And then he's putting some links in the chat for me. So yeah, so Puget Sound, we're going through our racial equity analysis, and I'll be very interested to know what comes out of that as well. Okay, I'm done.
And it looks like you speak and you ask and you receive, Amanda. There may be a toolkit link there for you as well.
I love it.
Absolutely. It's the magic. So if you come to this meeting, you can ask for what you want, and then magically answered by this room. So, aim high. All right. Well, thank you so much for that update, Amanda. So exciting to see what's happening in Tacoma, Pierce County. Really leading the way, and so excited that you're in that process. So I'm going to go ahead and steer us next to Denise. I don't want Denise to run out of time since we're close to the end of the meeting. We are exceedingly amazingly on schedule right now within 30 seconds. But we want to make sure that we're able to hear about this exciting project if you aren't familiar with it. So Denise Henriksen from EcoThrive, I leave it to you. Oh, and Denise, I think we have you on mute.
There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to present a little bit about our project in Burien. We have been working with the city of Burien. We pitched this concept to them back in 2019. And, speaking of the comprehensive plan, they had a provision in their plan to create an affordable housing demonstration program. But up until then, nobody had actually asked them to do that. And so they worked that year, and their city council, their planning department, their planning commission, their city council passed the affordable housing demonstration program in November of 2019. And then, and that was for 3 years, and Habitat pitched a project, got it in. DESC pitched a project, got it in. It ended in October of last year, and they extended it 2 more years because we were in the pipeline. We had already gotten our land. We had a purchase and sale agreement, but we had not gotten all the way through getting into the Affordable Housing Demonstration Program. But we have now, and we're building a cottage development that will be affordable for home ownership at the 50% AMI level. And our concept came from really talking to hundreds and hundreds of people throughout from 2016. Really, we still do these outreach where we asked people what they need to thrive. We also had some listening sessions, including a design charrette with the Northwest Eco Building Guild. We toured Square One Villages, which is down in the bottom left. That's a project down in Eugene, Oregon. They're now working on their 7th village. And every time we would go out, we would ask, what do you need to thrive? And what we heard consistently is people need housing security and they need community. So with that inspiration, we found a property in Burien Boulevard Park. We were really only looking for Burien because that's where we had the zoning permission. And we are on 2 main bus lines and across from an elementary school. And our land closed in February of this year, thanks to a LAP, a land acquisition program, funding from the Washington State Housing Finance Commission through their Community Land Trust program. This is our concept. Well, it's not our concept. This is what we're building. It's mostly duplexes. There are 3 standalone studios. It's 27 units on 1.8 acres, and it's really being designed for climate resilience. Growing food on property is really important, and a lot of things that are good for climate are also good for keeping your costs down, like having a smaller space, collecting water, and really sharing a lot. So it's a cooperative. It's a limited equity cooperative. That is our ownership structure. EcoThrive Housing formed a community land trust, and we're committed to creating cooperatives so that all the households share in the cost of the mortgage. So instead of one household having one mortgage, or 27 households share the mortgage for the village. And then the community land trust actually owns the property so that we can protect affordability forever. This is the 3-dimensional. It doesn't show the food forest. It doesn't show the growing, the blueberry bushes, it's going to be intensely growing food on the property because it'll be beautiful, and it will allow people with low incomes to have access to organic food really for the cost of their time to help cultivate it. And learning opportunities are built into this model as well. So there's a close-up. And 3 major development components are the project itself is about $1.1 million. We are anticipating so we'll be fundraising for the subsidy between what is affordable for people at 50% of what is 1/3 of their income and what the project will actually cost to build. And ways that we will keep costs low is that they're small footprint homes. They're between 350 and 650 square feet. There's a lot of shared resources. For example, the laundry will be in the common house. It's also going to be a lower impact on the environment and the ease of construction. We're sticking with stick built. Our vision is that once we have been able to prove this model here, because as I said, it does exist in other places, we can increase the demand and create more of a modular structure where we could build them more inexpensively for other jurisdictions that will allow this kind of missing middle housing. And that's kind of back to the ownership structure again. And then that's who we are. And I think there might be time for a couple of questions. If anybody has questions, I can also post my information into the chat. And I will stop sharing. There. Are we back?
We are.
All right.
Thank you so much for telling us about the project, Denise. Any questions coming up for anyone around this particular project? I think it's exemplifying a number of the different aspects that we have all been speaking about and talking about homeownership and its evolution. So wondering if anything has come up for anyone. A question for Denise? And yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it looks like Denise just put her information into the chat as well. So, you know, if something comes up later, feel free to reach out. Oh, Kathleen, there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say, the Community Land Trust members across Washington State are taking up the cause of trying to mobilize the mortgage funds for co-ops. We wanted to run a piece of legislation, and we will come back to it potentially in the next session to get an allocation of funds for the Finance Commission to study what it would take to increase product for limited equity cooperative mortgage financing. So we're gonna try to take another run at that and also do some work here in the interim to talk to the Finance Commission and help warm them up to the idea of receiving those funds and doing that work. So it's a big problem. A lot of folks want to be doing limited equity cooperatives, and there's not enough financial product to support them.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. That is definitely a challenge. And it's really the only way to bring the costs down for lower income families. I mean, what we want to do is create a viable and stable alternative to paying rent. And this is a way to do it. That's where your housing cost doesn't change will make such a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost at the very top of the half hour here, feeling really good about getting you all back into whatever you have next on time. So just wanting to again express my utmost appreciation for you spending this hour and a half here, and for all of the efforts that you have all made over this last year. I do really want to encourage you to realize that we are making strides, that we are seeing tangible change, and that we have a really good base from which to grow upon. So please do share the ability to connect into this meeting with others who may have not been here today. I'm always happy to add people in, and feel free to reach out with any questions. But at that, I am going to set a world record here for ending exactly on the time here, and wishing you all the best. I hope you will have a lovely sunny afternoon and the rest of the week, and I wish you all to be well.